You may have woke up and read this headline from the Wall Street Journal. Pope Francis softens Vatican's ban on blessing gay couples. What? Myself and 5 other cardinals are dubious. Cardinal Sarah, Burke, Zen, and 2 others formally submitted 5 questions to Pope Francis, one of which on guidance for Catholic priests and controversial same-sex blessings. We cut to the core of Pope Francis's answers and how we ended up with some shocking headlines. Back in the home front, chaos reigns as Kevin McCarthy is ousted as Speaker of the House. Did Matt Gaetz make the right move? And who could be the next lucky Republican to try and maintain order in the House? Or maybe it's time to just pull the fire alarm and exit. I don't know. All this and more on this week's edition of the LOOPCast. God bless everyone. Welcome back to the LOOPCast. I'm joined by Erica and Josh this week. And Josh, I believe you had a word to describe what this week in news was. What did you say?
Just a feast. There's so much going on, and it's hard to make sense of it all. That's what we're going to try to do this week here on Loopcast, but it's like a fire hose. It's crazy.
Josh, bon appetit. We're going to get right into it. Erica, I'm going to start with you. We had secular news outlets release the headline, Pope Francis softens ban on same-sex blessings for Catholics. And whenever you see something from the Wall Street Journal, you know that Pope Francis, unfortunately, has probably said something that would make them believe that to be true. And so we have this interesting odyssey with the dubia sent out by the Cardinals, and then it eventually gets Pope Francis and this answer back and forth. Very confusing for a lot of people, but we want to make it crystal clear. Erica did the research. What was the original dubia, and how did we get to that Wall Street Journal headline?
Yeah, so this is going to be a long journey, but bear with us because all the parts are really important. So first, just to start off with, if you're not sure what a dubia is, it literally is it's the Latin word for doubts, or you can translate it to question seeking clarification. And they're actually a regular feature of communication between the Vatican, the different dicasteries and offices, and local bishops who are seeking clarification on points of church teaching. Usually they're not that big a deal. So it'll be something like, can a minor basilica be a cathedral, etc. So that's your normal sort of level of dubia. Usually they're submitted by bishops or conferences or religious communities, but any Catholic can send them in. We had some lay Germans send in some dubia a couple of years ago asking if the church in Germany was in schism or not, and it was duly answered no. Format is usually a question. So the format is the bishop or the conference submit a question that can be answered with yes or no, because again, the point of submitting a dubia is seeking clarity, and that's going to become key. So how did we get from Latin words and long definitions and minor basilicas to the Pope and same-sex gay marriage blessings? ? Well, last July, ahead of the Synod, 5 cardinals, they were written by 2 of the cardinals, but 5 signed on, submitted dubia directly to the pontiff himself, Pope Francis. And those 5 cardinals were Walter Cardinal Brandmuller, Raymond Cardinal Burke, who our listeners are probably very familiar with, Cardinal Iniguez, and Cardinal Sarah, which, again, you're all probably familiar with him, and also Cardinal Zen from China, who is known for spending most of his life in prison because of the Holy Faith. And they revealed just this last week that back in July, they submitted 5 questions to the Pope regarding, and I'm quoting from them, statements on serious matters contrary to the doctrine of the Church multiplying ahead of the Synod. Now, why did they go public this week? That's the big question. Well, Francis apparently replied back in July, which is a surprise in a way, because you might remember back in 2016, there were 4 famous dubias submitted to Pope Francis after Amoris Laetitia came out on the question of marriage, and they were never answered. So it's kind of shocking in a way, given his pattern here, that he answered them almost right away. They chose to make public not the answers, but they chose to make public the fact that they had submitted questions this week. They stated in their not a press release, but their statement to the faithful, that his response, quote, only increased their concerns. So they resubmitted questions to him in a yes-no format to make it easier. Let's clarify, we'll make it easier. We'll make these questions, we'll condense them. So they, and then they,
questions, Erica.
Yeah, here we go. Go ahead, Josh. We can take a little break. Let me have a coffee. I need more
a break,
caffeine.
Yeah.
Quick. Whoa.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense to ask a simple yes or no question to a Jesuit. I mean, it goes beyond saying electing a Jesuit
little
pope
church
wasn't
humor
the
there.
greatest idea anyway.
Little niche humor to break up the story. Okay.
Yes.
So what did the
Erica,
yes...
you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you. Applause is welcome. All right.
Well, and
so
I just, real quick, before you go back, real quick, it was considered unpopular for Pope Francis not to answer the previous dubia. So
very much.
He got the word that he better respond to this one. But go ahead, keep going.
Okay, so here we go. They also said that they were publishing their questions due to statements from cardinals and bishops themselves contrary to the doctrine of the church. He did not respond to their satisfaction. And they are, quote, again, this is important, "We have now decided to make our letter public so that the faithful do not fall into error." And those of you who have studied theology, error is a big word, all right? So we're talking like error is as close as you can get without saying these are heretical, okay? All right, so what did they say? The yes-no questions are, and these are condensed. I tried to be as accurate as possible without spending an hour explaining these to you. Number one, is it possible for the church to teach doctrines contrary to those she has previously taught in matters of faith and morals? Super fundamental question. Number two, is it possible that in some circumstances, a pastor could bless unions between homosexual persons, thus suggesting that homosexual behavior as such would not be contrary to God's law and the person's journey toward God? That's where the Wall Street Journal and all the secular outlets and Catholic outlets came in.
That's their favorite one.
That's their favorite, right? That's what they glommed onto. But it actually gets more interesting. Number three, does the teaching that every sexual act outside of marriage, and in particular homosexual acts, constitutes an objectively grave sin against God's law? And does that teaching continue to be valid? Number four, here we come, the synod. Will the synod of bishops, in the doctrinal or pastoral matters on which it will be called to express itself, thereby be expressing the supreme authority of the church? So will the documents coming out of the synod be an expression of the magisterium of the church? That's an important question. Two more. Number five, could the church in the future have the faculty to confer priestly ordination on women? And six, can a penitent, while admitting a sin, who refuses to make in any way the intention to not commit it again, validly receive absolution? These are all really big questions, and that was the form that they presented to the Pope as a clarification to their earlier questions.
Yeah, this isn't cathedral talk, this isn't, can we share this cathedral and whatever.
Isn't like, can I call my basilica a cathedral? This is...
Right, groundbreaking, fundamental, absolutely core to what Catholics believe type
question. And I
question.
do just want to point out, these are questions to which, even 60 years ago, Catholics would have been like, no, yes, no. These aren't... It's almost shocking that they have to be... It is shocking that they have to be asked, and reading them was difficult, for sure.
Well...
Yeah?
This is why a lot of conservatives and traditionalists warned, 3-4 years ago, when we had this debate about taking a scissors to the catechism and cutting out the church's longstanding teaching that capital punishment is a justifiable solution, and changing that John Paul II had basically still upheld the teaching on capital punishment, but basically put so many restrictions on it that it was effectively neutralized, and he thought it could never really be used in modern society, But Francis took it a step further, and I thought it was a breach from the gospel and from longstanding church teaching, because he said it was basically inadmissible. And what does that word even mean? It's not even a moral theology term, that no one's ever used this. It's, it's like you're using, again, language that was like a courtroom, like, oh, well, actually, you can't talk about that evidence, that glove, because it's inadmissible. What does that have to do with it? That doesn't make any sense. But the whole problem with that is, even if you don't care about the death penalty, even if you think, I'm not really a big fan of it, I'd be okay if we got rid of it, that really wasn't the point. The point was as we're getting at these questions, can the church teach something contrary to what it had taught for so many centuries on an important on an important principle of faith and morals? That's why everyone was on, like a lot of conservatives or traditionalists were warning this. Everything that he's doing on this death penalty stuff is a dry run. It's a rehearsal for this. And here we are.
Right. Well, and here we are. Here's the twist. So the Cardinals of the dubia make public that they've submitted these questions. They did not publish Francis's initial responses that had sparked the follow-up yes-no dubia, although the first ones were yes-no dubia. Anyway, I digress. In response, the Cardinal Prefect for the Dicastery of the Faith, Chucho Fernandez, and he's brand new, and I also want to point out the irony that until 2 years ago, the Dicastery of the Faith was the CDF, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. So Chucho Fernandez is essentially in the office held by Cardinal Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger under John Paul II. So Chucho Fernandez comes out with this statement, quote,
talk about a downgrade.
Oh, Lord. Here we go. I don't even want to read this. Okay, quote, "The Pope has already answered the dubia of these cardinals. They have not published the answer of the Holy Father, who, despite his many occupations, took the trouble to answer them. Instead of publishing those answers, they are now making public new questions, as if the Pope were their slave for errands."
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So
So he went ahead and dropped the Pope's response in Spanish. So now we have it.
So I talked to my good friend Tom Hoops at Benedictine University.
Oh, shout out to
Benedictine
Tom.
College, sorry.
College.
Love you, Tom.
And I this was a few years ago. We were talking about the dubia, and the concern that Tom had is like, wait a minute now. It sounds like such a smart idea to have this dubia of all these questions. But the problem is, what happens if the Pope answers it? I thought, you know what? That's a good point.
That is a good point.
And after a while, I just thought, yeah, we got away with asking the questions without him responding. And of course, the answer then would be when a new Pope gets elected, that's hopefully, rock solid on the teachings and will uphold what the church teaches, that new Pope could just answer the previous dubia and say, yeah, actually, yes, of course, and answer it up and down the line. But the problem is you submit a new dubia, and unfortunately, he answered it. That's
oh my goodness.
Kind of a nightmare scenario.
I'm dubious.
Yeah.
But Erica, if we could, so he gives this answer, and I want to give full charity, of course, Pope Francis for what his responses were. Of course, like that kind of snide comment from the dicastery was interesting, but he did respond, and the responses were made public, and that is what, the Wall Street Journal, NPR, they all latched on to.
Exactly.
So what specifically, there was kind of a character to me to all of the answers. That legalese is a good way of putting it. But which ones really stuck out to you, like how he answered certain questions?
Right. They were all, I read through the whole thing. I read 2 different English translations. We don't have an official English translation yet. The overwhelming impression was, 1, this is not yes or no answer. And 2, it leaves the door so wide open for answers like, yes, the church's teaching on faith and morals can change, or the answer in particular, I will read out loud to the.
Well, he was unlikely to say it like that,
questioners.
of course, but yeah.
Right, he didn't say it like that, but you can see, and the subsequent coverage of it from leftist Catholic media and the secular media played this out perfectly. His answer to the question of same-sex blessings. He talks first about how marriage is an indissoluble union between a man and a woman. So he says, this is the church's teaching on marriage. But then in the next section, he says, quote, "Therefore, pastoral prudence must adequately discern whether there are forms of blessing requested by one or more persons that do not convey a mistaken concept of marriage. For when a blessing is requested, it is expressing a plea to God for help, a supplication to live better, a trust in a Father who can help us live better." And so the conclusion to be drawn from, in particular, his answers to question 2 on same-sex blessings is that while the doctrine hasn't changed, the teaching on marriage hasn't changed, pastorally, individual priests or bishops have the prudential, leeway, latitude to make a call and say, yeah, I'll bless this.
And that is brand new.
That is a new opening.
Right.
And so when the secular headlines...
It goes against what the Vatican has said even during this pontificate.
Right, exactly.
The concern I have with this, of course, is now you're muddy the water. Like, is God, is the church blessing homosexual unions? That's
sodomy.
Right, and the behavior associated with it, as you say. And also, by the way, a little zinger from someone, this pundit in Poland. She's like, wait a minute now. So the church that we have now, a priest can use his own discretion to bless a same-sex couple, but that same priest cannot use his own discretion to celebrate the Mass in Latin. Like, wait, what? And I'm not even a Latin Mass guy, but it is kind of curious what this pontificate is so vehemently against, and what it seems to be like, go ahead, let's open the door, let's be in favor of this.
Yeah. I'm just thinking practically of like how confusing this would be inside of a local church where there's someone that is living a very outspoken homosexual life and they get a very public blessing, holding hands with their same-sex partner, that they're very upfront about their lifestyle with them. What kind of scandal that could cause to the church community, people's vision of Catholicism, and to all people that are living same-sex attracted lives, that have followed the catechism, that have sacrificed, that have listened to church teaching. Essentially, to see this I always think back to how insulting that really must be to them. But just to make it more practical, like, that is a real result of what was just said here. And I think that's why, to the credit of the Cardinals, they're saying, hey, this needs to be made public. This isn't something that could just be handled in-house anymore, because we genuinely fear for error to be happening across the world. And it sure looks like it could be happening here. It's just the baseline.
Yeah, and I take your point. I take your point, Josh. Back in 2016 with the dubia, I also had some concerns about if we ask the questions, what if he answers? But at this point, I think what the Cardinals were saying was, this confusion is so public and so rampant that it would be better to shed light on it. Sunshine's the best disinfectant. I hope that that's true. It's a prudential call on their part. But it is very shocking to actually read the responses. Roger Severino had a good take on this. He's over at Heritage Foundation. He wrote, as is typical with Pope Francis, he acknowledges objective morality and doesn't change any church teaching, but uses ambiguous language about wholly unspecified hypotheticals that people who clearly want to change church teaching will seize upon to confuse multitudes.
And the people who want to clearly change church teaching, would it seem to be the Holy Father himself as well? I have to say it does seem that way.
It's hard to get around that conclusion.
Yeah, again, this is like the Jesuits, when they were founded, were so on fire with the Lord and just amazing at spreading the faith. They were an instrumental part of the Counter-Reformation. But right now, the story of the Jesuits over the last 70 years has been to water down and weaken church teaching in every way. And it continues. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I think it points to this sort of divorce that we see between church teaching and doctrine, and what the church has said definitively, and then how we actually live our lives. And in an authentic Christian life, the two are one, right?
Yes,
how you
integrated.
Pray, what you believe, how you act are all integrated. But the Jesuitical approach is to divorce all three of those and to say, we can isolate it over here. So you can't call me a heretic because I said I believe everything the church teaches, but there's this pastoral concern that's like your get out of jail free card and you can do whatever you want.
Well, and precisely because they know the younger people come up and they see this attempt to divorce and separate all these things, and they're not integrated, and they think of it as a farce, and they go along with what the main culture is doing.
It's not a feast, it's a cafeteria. It's like, oh, I like that, I don't like that. Yeah.
We haven't even talked about the climate change comments. That's a whole nother can of worms. When you talk about feast, it's not necessarily a good thing to feast on, but it just seems odd. So we have like Catholics concerned with the moral teachings of the church basically falling apart, and then Pope Francis went out of his way to basically say, I got to read the exact quote because it was so...
Just give some context, though. So he dropped a new encyclical. Give us the context, Pogo.
New encyclical. You go for it. I
Timed it for the
I'd
feast
say-
of St. Francis of Assisi. He's the patron saint of ecology.
The patron saint of ecology. I'm not sure if that's Francis's favorite title, St. Francis's favorite title, but
Wow.
yeah.
That was Pope John Paul II who gave him that title. So
It's true. It's true.
Quote, "It is no longer possible to doubt the human anthropic origin of climate change. I feel obliged to make these clarifications, which may appear obvious because of certain dismissive and scarcely reasonable opinions that I encounter even within the Catholic Church." Pope Francis.
he means people like me. That's okay.
Scarcely
I'm used to it by
reasonable.
now.
You are scarcely reasonable, Mercer. Come on, man.
Which is like,
Ugh.
I guess fine if you want it, but it how could someone look at this objectively and not see why people would be frustrated hearing such extreme, nasty language when there's literally like there's the other side where like we can't even get clarification on basic church teaching publicly, but we're getting yelled at for not doing enough on climate change, not acknowledging the human. I mean, Pope Francis just took part in the Clinton Foundation event in which he talked to Bill Clinton about climate change, this and that. I'm like, the people that he associates with are just so bizarre to me. I don't understand. It should make more sense understanding his background, but every time he does it, I'm like,
He's going
why
to
would
the
you go out of your
margins,
way to
Tom.
hang out?
Going to the margins.
Right, and these people are all taking their jets out to, like, weren't they bragging about a carbon neutral? Is the Synod carbon neutral or something like that? I remember
Yeah.
seeing something. And it's like, that's their concern. It's not actually, and plus, yeah, all those jets, I'm sure,
Well,
are going to be nice carbon,
and of course,
carbon neutral.
Anytime, a bishop, let's say like the Bishop of Cleveland, came out with a church teaching recently that was really good, talking about how God made us male and female, and therefore, this radical trans movement that is against, what it means to be a human person. And he just explained church teaching very well. And everyone, all the liberal Catholics were up in arms. Oh, how could he dare do this thing? And people in the schools were against it and all this stuff. How dare he promote these policies? Wait, are we against our shepherds promoting specific public policies? And then they turn around and now they're celebrating Pope Francis, basically,
Very specific climate policies.
Yeah,
Like,
basically,
there are some specifics.
he gives a little love letter to the Green New Deal, and they're all in favor of it. So, again, it's almost like the left is full of garbage on this stuff.
Almost.
Yeah. Almost.
Right.
Imagine that. But yeah, we're continuing to cover the Synod. We actually have a team over there right now, and we're going to be getting updates. If people have noticed in the Loop, we have a little Synod corner, which has been really cool. I've actually really enjoyed that myself. So if you're not in the Loop, get in the Loop, sign up. What are you doing here? It's our morning newsletter, but we have that section. We will have that section going forward throughout the Synod. So look out for that, and we will keep you updated on the LOOPcast with more updates here. I don't know if we have any wrapping it a bow Synod. Synod section.
I think I'm burned out on Synod.
Well, I think the biggest thing...
There's no bows. There's no
I think the
presents
biggest
here.
thing to think about with regards to the Synod and also with, the Pope's answers on the dubia, there's a lot of Catholics over the last 20, 30 years who took a lot of comfort in that the promise that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church, and that, the church is prevented from teaching error. And, this is always, I have to say, the bare minimum, right? It's like, oh, well, my mom and my dad, they're not cheating on other people. Like, oh, good. I'm glad they're not committing adultery. Like, that's the bare minimum. Like, we would want a church that was pastoral, that actually cared about its flock, so like, oh, well, the Pope and these bishops aren't, in total moral error and teaching bad things. Like, great. But if what they're saying is leading to massive confusion, then we're talking about people that are being led astray and souls that are going to make horrible decisions. And there's a lot of people today that basically think that the current Pope is given a wink and a nod. If you're a same-sex couple, go ahead and, the church still loves you. Do whatever you want to do, essentially. Even though he's not specifically saying that, it's a counter-teaching in a way. Officially, on paper, church teaching hasn't changed, but a lot of people are going to be led astray. That's a concern.
Right. And I think that's there. We were talking about this, getting ready for the show. The idea that when we talk about the gates of hell, right, it's really comforting to be like, okay, the gates of hell are not going to prevail. But one of our colleagues, Josh Resnick, he was pointing out that when we're talking about the gates of hell, it's not that like somehow Satan's coming in at the church, although, you can make the argument, but that verse in particular, it's not that Satan's coming in at the church and we have these impregnable walls and shields. When we talk about the gates of hell, it's talking about the Catholics, it's talking about St. Michael and the Archangels, it's talking about Jesus Christ going to the gates of hell through the jaws of death and martyrdom, going to the gates of hell and prevailing over them and snatching souls out of the hell that so many souls are living in right now because they're lost in error and
here
sin.
on earth, right?
Here on earth, exactly. So it's a call, it's a clarion call that look like we have to get out there, and kudos to the bishops and the cardinals who are trying to get out there to dispel error, to clarify this is the good life. This is the flourishing life that Jesus Christ offers to us.
Yes.
And the gates of hell will not prevail against the cardinals asking these questions, against great
and this
bishops.
is a church.
Yeah.
This is a church that cares about souls. It's not just a nonprofit organization that, charity soup kitchen all alone.
I think that's one of the sticking points with the way that many bishops, including the Bishop Fernandez there, characterizing Catholics who have these concerns as, well, they're just married to this rigidity and they're just clinging to this past when these rules were applicable or something.
Oh, rules.
It's not
Give me
that
a break.
at all. It's rules, schmools. I want to save souls, and sometimes rules help with that. I'm a mother. I know.
I saw that Matt Walsh said that 80s church ladies that people complained about were right about basically everything.
Isn't
like
that
there's a point there, I think. But yeah, and you know what, this is a good transition because we're gonna point out a win of the week here.
Yes.
We want to have some positive energy.
Pull us out.
So you mentioned the Bishop of Cleveland coming out with that really awesome teaching on the dignity of man and woman, essentially. And so we saw, and this is why this is important, because Tennessee and Kentucky bans on transgender procedures for minors were upheld in a federal court. So it was ruled, the federal appeals court upheld the ruling that it was illegal. And it does make me think that the church should be a leader on this front, right? Because we have the playbook, we have an understanding of the human person and human dignity that's grounded in years and years and years of intellectual tradition, and of course the truth in Jesus Christ. So when other people are confused about this issue and there's a lot of debate, it's important to have the church be, I think, a beacon of light here. So people like that, when the bishop speaks out with that kind of clarity, when your local pastor works with people that are confused, like, these are the results of this, because you need to win culturally before you can start seeing stuff like this upheld politically. So really happy to see that. I wouldn't be surprised if this happens elsewhere. I do see something like this eventually getting to the Supreme Court, just because there's been a lot of contradictory rulings across the way, and that's usually when it ends up at the Supreme Court. So hopefully it gets there when the Supreme Court is in where it is right now, because I don't know. I feel pretty good about Supreme Court justices. Thank you, Trump. But we're going to get into the, man, this is like a little soap opera, huh? Going on the Hill. We have
one glory to
Congress.
the next. Here we go.
So here's the real story. So last week we said, hey, we're going to keep you updated on the spending bill. The government might be shut down the next time we talk to you. Indeed, that is not the case. The government is still functioning. So we were going to be like,
functioning
well, if it's still
might be a
functioning,
strong word, Pogo. I just
okay.
want to throw that out there.
Don't pull the fire alarm on me right now.
Okay, sorry about that. I won't interrupt. All right.
I'm going to keep trying to talk. So no fire alarm. So the government, we were going to be like, hey, this is how they passed this bill, okay? And so it turns out Speaker McCarthy, he did indeed make some kind of deal with the Democrats. We're going to get into that. That apparently cost him his job as the speaker. He's no longer the speaker. That's an interesting saga. Now we get to the place where do we determine the speaker? So let's go back to the beginning. Josh, how did we avoid a government shutdown? What deal was made?
Yeah, so Speaker McCarthy went to the Democrats and said, let's just fund the government for the next 45 days. I think he would have been able to get a better deal, but the conservatives thought that the deal that he had wasn't good enough. And so because he couldn't count on like 7 or 8 conservative votes there, he had to get the votes necessary to open up the government another way, and we got even worse of a deal. I'm sympathetic to the conservative arguments, but, he cut a deal with the Democrats, and that was too much for the hardliners. And what ended up happening is the bill gets passed, the House and the Senate over the weekend. So it's going to fund the government for it's a 45-day clock from, September 30. And then Matt Gaetz from Florida, one of these, 7 or 8 conservatives really frustrated with the deal, said, I'm going to call for a motion to vacate the chair. And the thing to understand is that the way the House works, the constitutional office of the Speaker of the House is elected by the entire body, which is different than the Senate. The Senate majority leader is only elected by the majority party, and the minority party selects their leader, and that's how it goes. But all 435 members of the House can vote on the Speaker. And the problem is there's only a 5-seat majority. And so when Kevin McCarthy was the guy who was going to be the Republican candidate for Speaker back in January, he could not get the support of these 7 or 8 conservative guys. And they kept saying no, and it went ballot after ballot after ballot. And finally, here are our list of demands. And after, whatever it was, 25 some ballots, he finally says, okay, fine, whatever, I'll take the deal. I just get this over with. I'll become Speaker. And one of the planks in there was that only one person would be able to call for a motion to vacate the chair of the office of the Speaker, which is basically saying a vote of no confidence. And if a majority of the House doesn't want this guy in, he's out. Well, that's what happened. Gaetz, I ultimately thought McCarthy would barely prevail, but at the end of the day, there was about 7 or 8 conservatives in the House who are just like, I'm done with this guy. And
did you think that Democrats would save him, or no? It would be not enough Republicans would vote.
I mean, there's no incentive.
He hasn't made friends. Yeah.
There's no incentive for the Democratic Party to rescue you. And the problem is they probably offered. They said, we'll save you, but we want these 3 things. And if McCarthy said yes to that, then he was going to be gone within a week anyway. So I think that was it was a no-win scenario at that point. He had to just write it out and hope that Republicans are like, look, this has never been done before, and if this becomes a new thing, this is going to be a problem for every possible Republican speaker. And I ultimately, if I were living in the House, I would not have voted to kick him out. But I understand the frustration with a lot of Republicans because there has been a massive gap between Republican voters and their elected representatives, the people who are supposed to lead the party. For so long, people like George W. Bush, Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, John McCain, they're people who just basically hate everything about what their voters stand for, and they're totally embarrassed by them. And they don't want to talk about the social issues, and they don't want to talk about these cultural issues like CRT and all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh gosh, really? We just want to cut corporate taxes and bomb foreign countries. That's all we want to do.
Okay.
And Republicans are like, dude, China is eating our lunch, and our manufacturing base is being gutted, and cities are being destroyed, and families are being ripped apart, and and all you say is just the bare minimum, for example, on abortion issue, for the longest time, Republicans would only say, I believe in the dignity of human life. And pro-lifers are so used to getting 0. They're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump, who's again, not the super awesomest moral fiber. Oh, and he's the one that...
Our resident Trump simp.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then the debate in 2016 against Hillary Clinton gave the most pro-life answer in a public presidential debate I'd ever heard. He's like, babies are 7, 8, 9 months. Surely we should be against that. I mean, it's just like, he said it so commonsensical that it was, and again, by the way, that can't be said enough because the vice president of the United States, just about every Democratic politician, they keep denying that even late-term abortions even exist. Why are they denying that it happens? Because Americans still get very disturbed by this notion that a baby in the 7th month or 8th or 9th month could be murdered. So you know what? Maybe we need to talk about that more. Anyway, that's it.
So Josh, can I ask you? I want to ask you a specific question about Matt Gaetz, because he brought up something that you've brought up on this podcast, and I know there's a lot of interesting strategy when it comes to the broader makeup of the House. But he said he was frustrated that there's not line item voting for spending bills. And that was something that I think was promised to him by McCarthy back in January. And I know it's something you've talked about we should go back to, this line item voting. Do you think that was actually legitimate, or that's like a pipe dream that's never going to happen, so he's using it as a club?
I mean, I guess the thing is, one of the things that McCarthy did that was very good was this recent bill was to a 45-day Band-Aid. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But they did do a lot of progress on passing separate appropriations bills, like 12 separate appropriations bills, instead of these like ugly continuing resolutions or omnibus bills that just, one vote for a million things. And that's terrible. It's better to have 12, appropriations. But yes, I would love to take that next step. Like, it would be nice to actually have Congress start to debate things. And here's the thing that conservatives need to realize. If we call for separate votes on things, don't assume we're going to win these votes, But it would be nice, like, to have, in an appropriations bill to say, hey, maybe we should not have, funding for drug needles in this bill. Have separate votes on this stuff to make it embarrassing for Democrats or liberal Republicans to vote for stuff that's terrible. I would like that. But just know, if you do this, there will be votes that you think, oh, we'll surely win this, and you will lose some of those votes.
Exactly. But the point isn't that we're going to win every single line item. The point is to reorder the process, to get the process back to an actual democratic process where our elected representatives are actually voting on bills that affect us.
Doing their job.
Right. They're doing their job and they're governing. Something that with this whole drama with McCarthy really stuck out to me is that how important that midterm election was, that the reality is McCarthy probably made promises last January to the conservative branch to get elected that there was no way he could follow through on, or he could give up, because we just
I think even he would admit that.
And he would admit that, right? And so Gates coming back and being like, okay, you didn't give us these things. The whole deal was fraudulent in a way that got McCarthy there in the first place. And again, the frustration that I feel is that the Democrats are not, they're at this point in history, they are not behaving this way towards each other. Whereas the Republican Party, they're just tearing the party apart. They're fighting internally. The Democrats are sitting back and just eating popcorn and being like, watch them destroy themselves. This is fun. And the kind of...
Well...
I would love for the Freedom Caucus to be in the majority.
GOP Civil War, right?
Right.
Josh, let me ask you this as well, because we often talk about how there's a lot of things to learn from Nancy Pelosi, of all people. Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House for
the
how many
only
years?
person who wanted to be Speaker of the House.
And loved it.
She had many years. She's
it.
probably the most effective speaker in, at least a generation, maybe two. She's, of course, horrible.
How was she able to keep her job for so long? Whereas, like, we're looking with McCarthy, it's like, dang, he lost it in 6 months or something like that.
The first speaker ever to be ousted. I mean, we lost Boehner, we lost Gingrich, like they all resigned. So what was it about Pelosi? What was the longevity?
How did she do it?
Well, the problem right now, the Democratic caucus is relatively united because they want to, increase the amount of spending on government, and government is their agent of change, and so they want more spending. They're all kind of in unity on this. Like, they want abortion, they want to promote, same-sex stuff and trans stuff. So there's no real fundamental disagreement. Like, we want the government to promote, electric cars, and we want all this stuff. There's broad consensus. On the Republican side, there is a big debate, and it's been going on, since Donald Trump went down the escalator. There's a big debate in the GOP between those who want to remain have the Republican Party that was from, I call it the 2004 GOP, where, it's like pro-business, aggressive foreign policy, and, on paper in favor of social issues and cultural issues, but really feel unseemly to talk about it and don't want to emphasize it. And now you have a lot of people who want a more of a nationalist economic policy that's against free trade with China because we don't think it's really free. They're like not ashamed to talk about the pro-life issues, and it's not like they're in favor of increasing taxes or something like that, but that's just not the biggest priority. And so you're seeing a lot of this chaos, I guess, in a sense, and infighting on the GOP, because there's some Republicans who really just feel at the end of the day that their heart's really more like they're basically moderate Democrats, and it's a big fight. And it's
not that I'm the Joker, because I have another question for you, but I almost am siding with I feel in my heart siding with the chaos, because I am very frustrated with many Republicans that represent us that don't have our national interests in heart, in my opinion. They don't support a nationalist economic policy. They just want to go fight foreign wars and throw us at it.
Well,
I'm not for that personally.
Yeah.
So if we would have kept McCarthy as the speaker, it almost feels like that's pro-status quo. Pro-status, these 2004 Republicans. I know there's probably negatives to not having a speaker right now, but to me, Matt Gaetz, of course, he's in a safe Florida district, so he doesn't really have much to lose, but he kind of represents, I think, the anger of a lot of people. I'm not even saying can't speak for his character, but I think that, isn't it a good thing that there are kind of a few people in Congress right now that are so angry at the status quo that they're willing to break it?
I guess so. I mean, but the concern, I saw Representative Andy Barr from Kentucky, he's Republican. He was on Brett Baer's special report last night, and he was saying, look, let's not forget that McCarthy did do a lot of things, did accomplish a lot of things. Now Congress, the House, is basically on a standstill. So nothing can get done until you get a new speaker. And, I think his point was progress had been made from where we had been previously. And, it's hard when you have a 5-seat majority to do anything much faster. I guess, and a lot of people are like, okay, so Matt, you blew the thing up, and now we're gonna have to get a new election. Like, what's your plan? Like, what's the next plan? And I guess what I would like, yeah, exactly. Who wants to take it? This could, the next guy who gets elected is like, you might only be in there for another 2, 3, 4 months too. But what I would like to see is, even though, Steve Scalise, he's a Louisiana Republican, he's actually Catholic too. It seemed like he's like the next in line or whatever. But I almost feel like it would be better to have somebody who is like Matt Gaetz' favorite. Like, in other words, because it's easy to be a backbencher and bomb thrower, especially when you have a caucus of like a 5-seat majority, because all you need is 5 people to say, blow it up, we're done. And you have, 222 Republicans. It'd be nice to get somebody who everyone realizes this guy is like a total Freedom Caucus, true blue, rock rib, solid conservative, and have that guy be the Speaker of the House. Because you know what? It's going to be hard to govern, and in other words, it's almost easy to sit back and say, Paul Ryan stinks. Kevin McCarthy stinks. These guys are terrible. It's like, yes, that's easy to say. But once you get into power and you actually have to say, okay, how am I going to get 218 votes to pass this bill? And what are we going to do in this negotiation with the Democratic Senate and the Democratic White House? Yeah, the actual challenge of leadership and governing is harder than just being, one of the guys on the bench. So I still, again, I'm with you though. I'm with you in the sense that I've been very frustrated that we've had Republican leaders in both the White House and the Senate and the House who, on the campaign trail, they sound like they're, they sound like Thomas Jefferson, and they sound, they're like, we're so for freedom and everything, and then they get to the
small government.
Yeah, and then they get into Congress and they pass these massive, disgusting omnibus bills that finance the government.
I've heard that Jim Jordan's been thrown around.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
He won't happen, but I would love to see him up there. But he's doing such great work. He's doing great work. We do not want to move him off that committee on the weaponization because we need him in that seat.
Well, and if Jim Banks wasn't running for Senate in Indiana, he would have been a good one.
So do you have any projections? Like, do we have any projections on when we would get another House Speaker?
I think,
is that even?
I mean, by the time some people are downloading this, I think the GOP caucus will have already decided who their number 2 guy, who their new guy is going to be, and the vote will be formal like on Tuesday or Wednesday, of next week. So
okay. Any guesses? We could bet like a candy bar on it or something.
It's going to be, if it's not I mean, the number one pick is going to be Steve Scalise out of Louisiana. And if it's not him, it'll probably be just, then no one else will have wanted it. And they'll just basically say to Patrick McHenry, the guy who's currently in the temporary spot, like, I guess it's you, but I still say it's going to probably be Steve Scalise. He's been preparing himself for it for a long time. And it's just kind of funny because
he's also battling cancer right now. I mean, he's in treatment.
Right, he has leukemia.
Well, and he was the man who was shot by the Bernie bro. If you remember, there was that congressional softball practice, and someone who was hopped up on Bernie Sanders, psycho socialism stuff, brought a gun and started shooting at these guys. And if it weren't for the fact that Steve Scalise had just been elected into the leadership team and had security detail, there might have been a lot of congressmen and women that would have been murdered that day. Steve, as it was, had to spend a lot of time in the hospital in recovery, and he's back at it. So, I mean,
I'm rooting for him. I've been at his office one time.
That's right.
That was cool.
I was with you. We were in the office. We're like, look at
They let me
stuff.
in. I don't know why. They let me in. It was cool.
Was that on January 6th? No, I'm kidding.
No,
It was not on January 6th. No, Josh,
Nowhere
do not
near
do this
DC.
to me. No, it was at one of our annual get-togethers, the Catholic Vote. It was very cool. So so we'll keep you posted on that. I mean, we basically we had to cover two of the biggest issues, and we're barely scratching the surface. Like, there was so much that happened this past week. Maybe we should do another one. Let me know if you want two. If you want to add to my workload, I could do another LOOPCast. I don't know.
Pogo
that sounds
goes
kind of crazy.
overtime. Bonus episodes.
Jeez.
Yeah. Do you want it
anyway.
twice a week? Let's do that.
Whoa.
Yeah, do you want it twice a week? Maybe
do
we got to give the people what they want, but I feel like we get enough Josh for 1 week. You know what I mean? So
What about me? No.
no, Erica. Maybe we should just do an individual Erica show. You just come on and you could talk about your thoughts.
When I retire from
That would be great.
homeschooling, then maybe we can do that. But
Cool. Well, we move into the Twilight Zone, and that was not my bad diss of Josh. Josh, please forgive me. So you thought we were going to talk about it. We are going to talk about it. Someone did pull the fire alarm during a vote. Okay, now
During a vote for the House of Representatives, right?
all right, for the House of Representatives.
budget.
So this is Representative Jamal Bowman, and I mean, all-time excuse for pulling a fire alarm. It was a very well-known door in Congress. He said that it was confusing, and that door was locked, and he thought that this bright red thing that said fire alarm on it that you had to pull would somehow open the door in front of him, and was shocked to find out that it did not open the door. It actually set off the fire alarm.
I mean,
So he's sticking to that story. This is a total clown show moment, but that's not even the Twilight Zone, because I
New
feel
York's
like that's
not
kinda
sending
played.
their best. We expect politicians to be able to lie more effectively and more believably. I mean, it's not even a good lie.
No.
Come on, man. Step up your game.
So that's not even the best part, because of course he got trolled by everyone else in there. I think like Marjorie Greene Taylor went over there and was like, "Hey, this is the door that he was in. This is the fire alarm that he pulled." Like, it's pretty obvious. But his team sent out a memo to the press for how to respond, which, you know what, to be fair, tough spin zone. Try to defend your guy for pulling the fire alarm during a vote. And the quote is, I believe Congressman Bowman when he says it was an accident. Republicans need to instead focus their energy on Nazi members of their party before anything else, one of the talking points read from this memo. So instead of just apologizing for freaking out and pulling the fire alarm, he's firing back, well, those Nazis are the real problem. And so he did say that the memo would happen without his knowledge. Do I believe that? I don't know. It's up to you. But I mean, what an all-time pulling the Nazi card
Oh my
when
gosh.
you got to tuck your tail for a fire.
Yeah. Okay. Can I read Mary Catherine Ham's quip on this? Okay. My girl, Mary Catherine Ham, Hammer Time. She wrote, "The congressman's office did not know the use of the term Nazi would set off rhetorical alarms. They thought calling people Nazis was what opened rhetorical doors. This can all be very confusing." It's like, sweet Mary Catherine.
Man.
That was all. You see what she did there? You got that? Yeah.
You see the clip
pretty
of her on, I think it was Bill
Bill
Maher
Maher.
show.
Yeah, she owned Bill
just-
Maher. Yep.
Bill Maher and Sam Harris, they both hate Trump in the fiber of their
Yeah.
being. And she came on and was like, well, the Russia stuff was fake, right? Like, it was all fake. Like, no, not really. Like, it was different. Like, no, it's all fake. It's all documented. It was all fake. She's
so
awesome.
don't talk to me about elections being stolen in 2020 when you spent 3 years talking about 2016 being stolen, and she just went off. It was great. Good job.
Yeah, she ain't afraid of those dudes.
Bill Maher's been fun lately. The Ron DeSantis interview with Bill Maher was great. I was like, if Ron had been talking like that 6 months ago, we'd be in a different place, I think. So it's worth a watch.
What might have been.
What might have been. Erica, your Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I'm torn here. I have one that's sort of tragic and amusing, and one that's just tragic. I'm going to go with tragedy. We've had a few people write in and ask if we could just highlight what's going on with Armenians over in Azerbaijan, which is a little country right south of the country Georgia, not the state Georgia. And it's so Armenia. Those of you who know 20th century history have probably heard of the Armenian genocide, when the Turkish government basically slaughtered millions of Armenian Christians, ethnic cleansing of the Armenians, Armenians are primarily characterized by their Christian faith, right? So they are hereditarily, racial. They're Christians, though. And they're sandwiched between all of these Muslim countries in the Middle East. After the Armenian genocide in Turkey, there was territory carved out for them in what's traditionally been their homeland of Armenia. Azerbaijan government has been slowly encroaching on that territory. There have been military strikes, and unfortunately, many Armenians are fleeing in sort of a reverse flight from Azerbaijani contested territory back into Armenia for safety. It's tragic. It's terrible. There's one town where there are 120,000 Armenian Christians and 105,000 of them left. So we're talking just, devastating. People are suffering. People are living in their cars on roads. There's no water. It's very dry territory. So I just wanted to highlight that for my Twilight Zone and ask everyone to please pray for the Armenians. If you want a really great read on the Armenian genocide, to get to know what this people has been through, there's a novel, I'll link it, called The 40 Days of Musa Dai, and it's about a group of Armenians who resisted the Turkish genocide. And it's a wonderful book written by Franz Werfel, who wrote the Song of Bernadette, and was not himself Catholic when he wrote these novels. So I will link that. Please pray for Armenia. Please pray for all persecuted Christians. While we feel the suffering here from a white martyrdom, there are people around the world actually suffering, red martyrdom. So continue to pray for the persecuted church. That's my highlight.
And if you want to hear a robust discussion with someone with personal experience, I actually did do an interview with...
I cannot wait.
Her name is Simone Rizkala. She is Armenian, and she's Armenian Egyptian because her family had to flee to Egypt during the Armenian genocide. And it's so hard to even put in words when you talk to someone so familiar with such suffering. I mean, I had chills for most of the interview, but she was so articulate. And one of the interesting things is like people forget that our Christian heritage actually comes from that region.
Right.
Like Noah's Ark landed in Armenia, and the official state religion of Armenia was Christianity in like 300 AD, I think. So it was actually before it was the Edict of Milan came out, where it became illegal. So they are Christian to the core. I think I asked her, like, so most of Armenians are Christian, right? She's like, there's no difference. Armenian is Christian. It's like ethnic Christianity. And
right.
That is such a interesting concept. It's so foreign
not
to me.
American,
like, I really
right?
got to, I got to go into that. Yeah. I was like, man, I kind of am jealous sometimes. Like when I hear that, or I look at Jews who are ethnically Jewish, I'm like, it's one and the same. There's no difference. It's not like you picked it up. She had some amazing insights on that. She's so well educated. I'm really looking forward. I have to edit that one up, so that's coming out soon. But we heard the calls. We heard a lot of people say it's not getting enough coverage. Please highlight it. And I was just so happy that Simone took the time to come on and share her story. It was amazing. So keep an eye out for that one. That's coming out soon. Josh.
So I have 2 items for
It was
Twilight
a feast.
Zone.
The fire hose.
2 for
I
1.
told you it's a feast, and I get
Golden Corral buffet.
I get to tie them together, which is kind of fun. So
Sweet.
the first part of the Twilight Zone is, of course, we had the death of longtime Senator Dianne Feinstein from California. She was the one that accused Amy Coney Barrett of saying that she had the dogma lives loudly in you, which is so cute when an insult is actually a badge of honor. Like,
It was awesome.
I would love that. Like, you get up to St. Peter and like, let's talk about your life. Like, well, the dogma lives loudly in me.
Sweet.
So Gavin Newsom, the communist governor of California, has to pick somebody to replace him. He picks a woman from Maryland. That's the Twilight Zone feature of it. But her name is LaFonza Butler because he wanted to pick a black woman to replace her, and she's actually a lesbian black woman. But the bigger thing about this, everyone's teeing up on is like, oh, she's from Maryland. That's crazy. And, oh, you got to check off all the boxes. She's, LGBT. She's black. She's a woman. The real thing here is she's one of the Democratic Party's biggest fundraisers. She's the president of Emily's List, which raises millions and millions and millions of dollars specifically from people who love legal abortion. So just imagine this. If one of the senators from Texas died and the governor of Texas decided to take the head of that a National Rifle Association and make him the next senator from Texas, that this is what the equivalent of this is. It's just like unheard of. Like it's so like literally you've got 20 million people that live in California, and this is the best person you could come up with. Like, well, she spent 3 years here in California in charge of a government union. Oh, great. Even worse. So that's the big, that's a major Twilight Zone for me. I think he's doing it because he wants to run for president, and then he can go to the pro-abort groups. Like, I literally took one of the head of NARAL and made her a senator.
Yep.
How could you not support me? So that's, to me, presidential politics 101, not what's best for the state of California, no doubt. My second Twilight Zone is that the United States Postal Service has announced a new forever stamp. Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Of course.
So, this is just kind of interesting to me, right? And Vice President Kamala Harris is so excited about it, She said, Ginsburg broke barriers her entire life, a fierce legal mind, relentless advocate for justice, progress and equality. The forever stamp is a beautiful tribute to her life and legacy. Well, I have to say, kudos to Benji Sarlin. He's a conservative pundit. He said, to put this in perspective, Amy Coney Barrett could buy a stamp now and still use it at the same price in 2059 when she'd be the same age as Ruth Bader Ginsburg was when she left the court.
I'm going to send Amy Coney Barrett a sheet of the stamps. How about that?
I think if she might get offended on that, but yeah, I think that's pretty funny.
That's true. Don't take it the wrong way.
There's been a few charges from LOOPCast listeners that you're a little bit ageist when it comes to serving in the Senate and for president. What would you say back to that?
Well, it's kind of funny. At the most recent LOOPCast thing, somebody made a comment that old guy wasn't letting you talk. I thought that was pretty funny. Did you see that? I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you read the comments. I didn't have the heart to bring it to you, but yeah,
I know.
The people want to hear me
it's
speak.
It's probably
Josh.
like your cousin or something who wrote that, but
your mom.
Yeah. No, it's my burner account actually. I was mad.
I love this ageist comment. Like, look, I would be perfect. We have a minimum age requirement to serve in the House, in the Senate, and the White House. I think there should be a maximum age too. And I wouldn't have a problem with it being applied to the Supreme Court as well. Like, I mean, what the idea that, like the stand-up comic made this joke about, and this is before Dianne Feinstein had passed. He said, the Cobb salad was invented in 1933, and he went through the whole process of this family in California that started all these vaudeville theaters because the miners, they'd get done, they'd be mining for gold, and they had these theaters up and down all through the San Francisco to Los Angeles, and he invents the Cobb salad in 1935, and he's telling this whole story, and everyone's like, "What? Where is he going with this?" And he goes, 2 years before that, Dianne Feinstein was born.
Oh.
Like, my goodness, and it's just like, to put it in perspective, like, why is she governing? It's like, listen, and I like, Chuck Grassley. He's a good conservative senator from Iowa. He's been great on judicial nominations, but I don't know if he's 88 or 90 or whatever years he is old. It's like, is there no one else in Iowa that could carry the torch for freedom? Like, why do you have to stay in power for so many decades? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Especially when Feinstein's getting like wheeled in, basically.
She was, yeah. She was being wheeled in.
She doesn't understand.
And
she couldn't understand when to say yay or nay. I mean, it was so sad. It was so sad to watch.
They're just not there. And you see this, you just watch footage of President Biden trying to give a press conference, and it's painful to watch. And same with, oh my gosh, brain.
Well,
the
point
Republicans
was,
too, yeah.
My point was, Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, thank you.
My point was that 80 is enough, that there should be a maximum age. Like, after you're 80 years old, do you have something to contribute to society still? Sure, but maybe elective office isn't for you at that point, once you're 81, 82, 83 years old. And if that were put in place literally this minute, yes, that would preclude, I suppose, both Biden and Trump from serving because, once you hit 80, you're timed out. But again,
deal.
I'd take that deal. It's like, and that's not against Trump. I'm not trying to say against Trump at all. I'm just like, we have these people who have been serving in Congress. Like, once you hit 80 years old, I mean, things start to get slow. And I mean, I think there's a chance.
Just like go enjoy your twilight years. I mean, it's a kindness to them too. Like go enjoy what you've built.
Yeah.
And raise up, mentor the next generation.
Right. And you're getting wheeled in and your handlers are actually running the show, because that's like Dianne Feinstein was at, well, hey, it sounds like you're against this bill. She goes, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, actually you sent a press release out on that. And like,
I did.
Yeah. It's so bad.
It is terrible.
Yeah, but we have people listen to this that are of advanced age.
Yep.
How do I say that? I don't want to offend any people. I love my grandparents. Like, my grandma just turned, not to out her, but she's in her 70s and she just had a birthday, and like, she's one of the most wonderful people in my life. I love her so much. Just because you're of a certain age doesn't mean you can't do certain things. And we're not trying to say like you don't have anything to contribute. Of course you do. And of course there's plenty of people that are still sharp in their 80s that still can do really amazing things. But like,
right. Well,
the pressure that is put on people in their 80s to travel, like what's required of someone that as a politician, especially in the Senate, especially like in the U.S. Senate, where you have to travel all the time, you have to speak in front of people, you
raise money. There's a lot of things that have to be done.
Exactly, raise money. It's okay. I think it's okay to say, yes, you're still sharp, talented, you have plenty of things to do, but you don't have to serve in the Senate. Like, that's all we're trying to say. We're not trying to put anyone down for being older. Like, old people, like elderly people are amazing. Like, I love my elders.
Hopefully I'll be one someday.
You can contribute in many ways after your career in the House and the Senate's over. Like, the fact is, when we decided as a country, not us, it was done generations before us, when FDR was, I did not care for FDR and his policies, but he was a fantastic politician. He understood how to get things done, get himself reelected. He was like unbelievable. He got elected 4 times. I mean, like, no one could stop this guy. And we realized that every once in a while, you might have a character or a person who's so gifted at the levers of power and getting reelected that you have to make sure, wait a minute, we need to protect ourselves and we have to have term limits. So we put term limits in for the presidency, right? I think that's fine. Rather than having term limits for the House and the Senate, I would just say, again, 80 is enough. So, because, not many people are going to get elected to the House when they're 25 and serve 55 years. I don't think that's the concern. But there are advantages to being an incumbent, and people are like, well, he wants to keep running and it'd be hard to challenge him in a primary, so we'll just kind of go along with it. I think that's a thing in our system we need to fix, and I think a maximum age would be a good way to do it.
Look, I'll say it right now. If we can get this 80 term limit passed, I'll say 80 is enough for this podcast. If I'm 80, I'm giving it up. No more LOOPCast.
What does that give us?
Josh, you'd be
70 years?
Would you be like 100, 110, something like that? I think that's enough. No one would want to see us behind the mic at that point.
That.
So true.
We'd be playing cards and fishing and listening to Outlaw Country.
It's a deal.
It'd be a
we
great
will
time.
all retire.
Deal.
Yep. Okay.
Deal's
Got
made.
it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you want to help us, actually, no, we got a sweet review. So some people
I do have
splash
to
us
go.
with
I have to go.
reviews because okay. Yeah.
God bless.
All right. Not shed to peace. I'll do
your
a quick
review thing. I'll listen.
Quick review thing. Erica's here in the audience. So people splashed me with some reviews because I stayed up till 2:30 editing the flop debate episode. Not that the episode that we did wasn't good, but the debate was a total flop. But someone said that hate news, love Loopcast. Today's episode was golden. You have to listen to know why. Thank you.
Awesome.
You like our inside jokes. You like our gold jokes. That was just low-hanging fruit if I've ever had it.
That'll keep us going. Thanks for loving the gold bar jokes, because that was a little corny.
We're at 377. I've been keeping track on Apple Podcasts. If you also want to help us, Spotify's another place you can leave reviews. And then the inbox, loopcast@CatholicVote.org. You could talk to me. Love talking to you guys. But thank you so much for listening. And stay tuned for some new interviews coming out. The last one we did was actually with Brian and Josh in person. That was a really fun project for me. I was able to hopefully get some good insights out of the men who started Catholic Vote, the reason we're in the chair. So go check out that one if you like. And until next time, we will see you on Thursday. Bye, guys.